Welcome to Networking Unleashed, Building Profitable Connections, the show where you go beyond handshakes and hellos to unlock the real power of relationships in business. I'm your host, Michael Forman, and today we're exploring a topic that's changing the way we lead, serve, and connect: psychological safety and compassionate communication. My guest is an expert in creating emotionally safe workplaces and delivering service with heart. And here's why that matters. The best connections, whether with coworkers, customers, or colleagues, only happen when people feel safe, seen, and supported. We're diving into how kindness, empathy, and trust aren't just soft skills, they're strategic advantages in today's business world. So, if you're ready to build deeper connections, create safer spaces, and unlock the kind of networking that drives real results, this episode is for you. I'd like to welcome to the show today Bruno Cignacco. I can't pronounce the last name. I'm going to have you do it. All right. So I would just like to welcome you to the podcast. And Bruno, why don't you give us a little about your background? First, give us the correct pronunciation of your last name, and then tell us about your background.
Thank you very much. The surname is very difficult. It's an Italian surname. It's Cignacco. And thank you, Michael, for your invite. I feel very honored to be here. A bit about my background. I have a PhD in management with focus on international marketing. I have been advising companies for more than 30 years on international marketing, and lately, over the last few years, on compassionate business. I'm a university professor and best-selling author. My latest book is titled The Art of Compassionate Business, published by Routledge in its second edition, and I'm very hopeful that this interview will be amazing and insightful. Thank you very much again for your invite.
I hope it's going to be that way too. Okay, so let's jump right into the questions. How does creating a psychologically safe workspace improve internal networking and collaboration amongst teams?
Very important question. But psychologically safe workplace, let's define this term that is a bit technical for some of the listeners. For example, psychologically safe workplace implies a work environment where employees can feel supported, they can express their voice without being ridiculed or censored. In this workplace, people are playing a lot of what we call positive side of politics, not negative side of politics, which implies supporting each other, trusting each other, sharing resources. And in this workplace, you don't see the negative side of politics, which is one-upmanship, for example, slandering, or any other type of turf wars, for example. And in this workplace, people feel free to express their voice. In some cases, they feel free also to express their voice in a very innovative way, proposing non-traditional ideas. And these people feel assisted when they have any problems. And in this workplace, you usually see a lot of activities that are very supportive, such as coaching, mentoring, training on the job, shadowing. And in this workplace, according to research, when you develop a psychologically safe workplace, employees tend to be much more satisfied. Customers tend to be more satisfied too. Why? Because employees that are happy tend to serve customers more effectively. These workplaces have also lower stress levels. They have higher productivity. They have lower absenteeism. They have lower turnover. And this impact positively on the bottom line. Why? Because when employees are satisfied, they are more prone to give their best, to work in an unconditional way, and to contribute to, for example, collective projects in a much more insightful and meaningful way. How you develop these workplaces? First off, is we have to understand that these workplaces are trust-based workplaces. And how you develop trust? Trust takes some time to develop, but there are simple tips. For example, developing meaningful communication, interaction within the workplace, which imply in some cases asking, for example, how colleagues feel. There is an interesting research paper that observed that when you're working for a company with your colleagues, and you observe that one of your colleagues is feeling a bit down, feeling a bit sad, or in bad mood, by asking a simple question, how they feel, or, for example, telling them that you assume that they're feeling a bit not so well, if you can help them, by this simple interaction, you can build trust. Why? Because you show interest in them, you show empathy, and you show compassion for their problems. But also in these workplaces, people tend to look for agreements within the workplace that are win-win. This means that nobody is winning at the expense of others. This is quite relevant. Why? Because in many business environment and workplaces, that people in many cases try to take advantage with their companies, take advantage of customers, or take advantage of employees, or take advantage of business partners. And these win-lose relationship or win-lose agreements tend to break up the bonds with these stakeholders. Another simple way to develop a very important trust-based environment in the workplace will be, for example, nurturing what I call in my book the qualitative aspect of business. Because in business, there are two main aspects. Quantitative aspects, what can be measured, such as profit, market share, productivity. This can be measured in a very precise way. They can be counted very precisely. It can be compared, for example, interannually. But the qualitative aspect of business are as fundamental as the quantitative. What are the qualitative aspects of business? Include generosity, support, gratitude, care, empathy, compassion. And why these are so important? Because when you embrace these values, when you embrace these principles, you nurture this relationship with this stakeholder, with your colleagues, with customers. And we have to understand that in business, the most important factor is the building of relationship, a strong, long-lasting relationship with different stakeholders within the company, employees, management, and outside the company, customer, supplier, business partner, and community members. So focusing on qualitative aspect of business that we call also relational aspect, and quantitative aspect of business. Many companies focus only on the quantitative aspect of business. They try to obtain profit, productivity, market share, in some cases by all means, to the detriment of the relation.
The days of the quantity is really passe. It's the quality of the relationships. You hit on so many points for networking. Know you, trust you, they'll do business with you. It's the creating the relationships, not just the clients. So not just the customers. So there's a whole lot what you just said, but I have more questions, so we're going to go into a little bit further. What role does compassionate communication play in networking, and how can it be competitive? How can it be a competitive advantage in business?
Very important. Compassionate communication implies that, let's define compassion first. Compassion is when you interact with others, you understand how they think, you understand how they feel, and you try to help them whenever possible, especially when others face difficult circumstances. For example, let's imagine that the supplier delays the delivery of goods to your company. And in this supplier, you have signed before a contract with the supplier. If you are not compassionate with the supplier, you will try to penalize the supplier for having delivered this good late. But if you are compassionate, you will relate to the supplier one-to-one, if possible in person. You will talk to the representative of the supplier to understand what difficulties they face in this last delivery in order to help them, because you try to preserve the relationship and try to brighten this relationship with the supplier. You don't try to apply literally the fine print of the contract, because if you do, you might get the penalty from the supplier, but you will break up the relationship. You try to preserve the relational aspect. This is quite important. There is a very interesting study that observed that in the health sector, for example, healthcare sector, when doctors have a compassionate conversation before this patient are to be operated, go through surgery, 1 minute conversation, this patient during the operation process, during the surgery, has less anesthesia, they need less anesthesia, and they need less recovery time after the operation. Why? Because they feel less stressed, they feel more supported. 1 minute interaction only. This means understanding how they feel, how you can help them, try to help them soothe themselves. And this is quite important because compassionate is not only being nice to people, but is bringing about a positive cycle of reciprocity. You try to support people, you try to understand, you try to connect and build deep rapport. And in return, you are more likely to receive a reciprocal treatment. Why? Because people, when they are supported, are more prone to contribute spontaneously, unconditionally. You can afford them to cooperate, but they're more prone to cooperate when you try to help them, because when you help them, you help yourself, because everything is interdependent in business. You cannot succeed without them, and vice versa.
Okay. So you speak about compassionate customer service. How can that same mindset be used when approaching new clients, partners, or networking opportunities?
Very interesting. Compassionate customer service implies that you adopt an attitude of service. You try to add value. This means that instead of focusing on yourself as a seller, as a salesperson, you focus on them. You are customer oriented. This means that you will try to first to discover what are the specific unique needs that they have. Not only needs regarding the product, but for example, what we call emotional needs. In some cases, this customer to buy the product needs some reassurance. Maybe you can provide with some guarantee, or maybe they need a trial period. They are not very sure, so you try to support them, not only offering the best product that is adequate for them and might not be suitable for other customers, and in some cases also implies that you interact regularly with this customer, making them feel positive emotion before they buy the product, during the buying process, and after they buy the process. We call this interaction touch points. Every time that you interact with customer through emails, phone calls, in person, through the website, these are touch points. Every touch point should bring about positive emotions in customer, because when you do, this customer is more prone to feel satisfied, which is related to positive emotion, and is more prone to become loyal, committed to your company, and is more prone to leave positive reviews. Instead, one of these interactions, customer experience a negative emotion, well, this customer is more prone to leave your company, or doubt, or trying to return the product, or look for competing product. So the only way that you can deliver a very good customer service, a compassionate customer service, is to be very humble. Under promise, over deliver. Under promise, this means that you promise less than they expect, and then you surprise them in a very positive way. We call it marketing delighting customer, when you give more than they expect. And when, for example, you are selling, let's say, some like these diaries, and then you are selling these diaries, and these diaries are very nice price, very nice quality, but you give a pen, very nice pen, a fine pen, free. You are giving a gift attached to this product, and you are creating a positive imbalance. They feel indebted with you because you have been generous, and they're more prone to respond in a positive way, recommending your products to others, leaving positive review online. Instead, some company act in the opposite way. They act in a very stingy way. I want to give the product that will give me the highest commission. Why? Probably it's not the one that they are looking for, but I want to think about my own commission. This is an attitude of selling, not of service. Always choose an attitude of service. Service implies adding value to customers.
Very good. Okay, so let's go to a little advice. What advice would you give to someone who struggles to be vulnerable or genuine when networking?
Very important in networking with any stakeholder or potential stakeholder. Could be a business partner, could be a supplier, could be an intermediary like a retailer. You have to talk not only about business topic, but also you have to talk about non-business topic. You can say, this doesn't make any sense, because at the end you are networking with a person, a human being, and the commonality between you and the other person is, regardless of the role, regardless that you are the CEO and the other one could be a representative of the supplier and so on. So it's that you're human beings. When you connect on a much more human level, this means that you understand that you are both human beings with fear, expectation, aspiration, dreams, and you talk about not only about business topic, but you talk about at the beginning like a small talk, or at the end of the conversation about where they live, what the hobbies are, and so on. You try to connect on a much more personal level. Many entrepreneurs in the Far East, for example, Japan, China, understand this, the importance of building personal relationship first, and then on the top of this, building solid business relationship. But the person can first. Here in some individualistic culture like United States and UK, we privilege time is money. Let's try to close the deal immediately without, in some cases, knowing the person and take the time to know the person on a much more humane level. This means that you talk about business, but also you interpret this in the conversation, what I call natural conversation, interpret some topic like, for example, talking about the weather or the hobbies. Try to avoid controversial topic that could be, for example, religion or politics, but try to talk about how they are on a personal level, and this will clear any hindrances that are on the way to get an agreement. And always look for ways to clear common ground. This means that use a lot of words such as we, our agreement, our common goal. What I hear in many conversations that they use the first person of the singular. I, my, me, myself. This is very individualistic. Instead, when you talk about our agreement, our deal, our common goal, something that are obvious. We are both looking into develop robust relationship. You talk about we, and also try to identify their needs, because at the end you want to develop an agreement. If this is possible, that is a win-win agreement. If you don't know what the needs are and you only think about your needs, you are more prone to developing win-lose agreement where you win at the expense of them. But these are short-lived agreements. They cannot prosper over time.
Very good. Very good. And I speak about so many of the same things because really we both talk about networking, but it's so similar. It astounds me. But let's go on. How do emotionally safe environments lead to stronger, more profitable connections, both internally with teams and externally with clients or collaborators?
Very interesting. Let's talk a bit about a very important phenomenon described by Daniel Goleman, that is the phenomenon of emotional contagion. Emotional contagion implies that when you feel an emotion and you start interacting with others, supposing that you feel happy, you feel cheerful, you tend to infect others with this positive emotion and they tend to experience this emotion and act accordingly. Why this happens? Because in our brain we have mirror neurons that tend to help us replicate the emotions that are of people around us. The opposite happens with negative emotion. When you experience anger and you treat people and you adopt an angry tone of voice and you try to dismiss them and so on, these people are infected by this negative emotion and they are less prone to cooperate, less prone to share with you the resources such as information, technology. We have to be aware, are we bringing about positive emotion in this workplace, into this relationship? And why is so important bringing about positive emotion? Because according to research, positive emotion expand your brain and help you become much more creative, help you utilize what we call the internal resources such as critical analysis, creativity, and others. Instead, constrictive emotions, for example, fear, they make you adopt what we call the freeze, fight, fly mode, where you tend to be more reactive. You tend to trust less others. You tend to withdraw, tend not to cooperate. In some cases, this prompts you to compete with others instead of cooperating. And in any relationship, you have a basis of cooperation. If you're not willing to cooperate, this relationship won't prosper, because all relationships in business and non-business environment are only prone to succeed when the needs of both parties are fully satisfied. If the needs of only one party are satisfied, this relationship is prone to fail, not to succeed.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct. What's one thing most people get wrong about connection, whether in customer service or professional networking?
Very wrong. What I observe is scripted conversation, mechanical conversation, parrot. I call parrot
Right.
style. For example, I see some companies that I feel a bit of shame from outside when I see this company that they give script on a piece of paper to memorize and say, okay, when you meet the customer or the client, you have to say, hello, how are you? We have product A. This sounds so mechanical. You are talking to a robot, not to a person. And a scripted conversation hinders the spontaneity, the natural spontaneity that can be brought about in a conversation. And people feel it. They feel this impersonal. They feel that this is not natural. And people tend to withdraw from this type of salespeople or this type of stakeholders. Instead, when you make the conversation more natural, which implies including emotion, talking about personal aspect, but also don't be so aware of the timing, because in some cases I see also some salespeople that have a quota. They have a quota, they say, you know what, this conversation cannot last more than 5 minutes because you have to close up 6 clients per hour. Okay, this means that you're limiting the conversation. The other person feels the pressure of time. They cannot expose their ideas fully. So give time for the conversation to develop. Be natural. Be also others oriented. This means that you don't focus so much on you, but also you focus on others. Try to adopt a learning attitude. You're not there to close any deal. You're there to learn from them and try to see that you can develop an environment where a beneficial agreement for both can be unfolding. But don't get so focused on the sale or get so focused on closing the deal. Instead, learning from each other, because learning from each other will help both of you arrive at an agreement that is arrive to an agreement that is more win-win, mutually beneficial. Instead, when you focus only on your needs or what you will say or how we can close the deal, you are self-centered. Other people can feel it. So very important, make this the conversation spontaneous, natural, and non-mechanical. I feel in this case that artificial intelligence cannot substitute a natural conversation yet. You can see good bots, but you feel that it's a bit mechanical, a bit impersonal, and also the conversation, try to make this as expressive as possible, expressing your idea clearly, but without monopolizing the conversation and making also your idea very clearly expressed, including your emotions.
All right, now let's bring this podcast full circle. And can you share a personal or professional story where creating a safe, compassionate space led to an extraordinary connection or opportunity?
Yes, I have a recent example of a company that we were advising. This company has very bad reviews online. They has obviously the employees were a bit demotivated because sales were going down. And what we discovered, because there is a very important factor when sales are going down, there is employee demotivation, there is low employee morale. There, in most cases, there is something about fear. Employees tend to feel fearful of losing their job, or fearful of not closing sales, or fearful of not achieving the quota, or fearful of being penalized if they don't meet the objective, or fearful of being outpaced by colleagues. So we discovered, and if we were right, there were some pockets of fear within the company, and the fear was so ingrained, and the fear was about, for example, not meeting the quotas that were very strict and in some cases unachievable, that put a lot of pressure and didn't allow employees to relax. And also the conversation with customer was so short that the customer felt a bit forced, because I observed one of the conversation in practice in person and was so short that the customer couldn't even expose their idea. Were a kind of constrained conversation, and customers were not given the opportunity to express their view. Moreover, customers were treated like little figures in the database as a means to make profit, instead of being treating this customer as a real human being that are spending their hard-won money on this company potentially and need to be treated with respect, and their needs need to be recognized in a legitimate way. So what we did is we understand that the quota system, closing certain deals per hour was too strict. Employees felt much more relaxed, less stress level went down because then there was a survey. And also we saw that the conversation were a bit scripted too, a kind of mechanical, the way the introduction, without adapting the style to each customer. In some cases, some customer needed 1 hour to talk about this. In some customer needed 10 minutes. Some customer needed to know more about this technical specification. So we introduced more flexibility with the approval of the manager. The manager were not very convinced at the beginning, I have to say, because there was a lot of resistance, but this was possible to introduce. And we gave a 3-month period of like a time span to see there was an improvement. And we check also the customer review at the end of the 3 months, and we check also the employee morale with a very simple employee survey. We check also the reviews and the sales levels. So these were the 3 indicators. So employee morale, sales reviews, sales levels, and also the customer reviews. And so we observed that 3 months with these simple changes, customers were given a lot of time to talk. Employees will not be penalized with the strict quotas. Employees were also offering customer products that were not the most expensive one, products that were the most suitable for this customer, because in the previous system, employees were pushing the product that were the most expensive one, even when they were not the suitable for customer. What made this customer, in some cases, feel pushed to buy this product, and then they left a lot of negative reviews. In both cases, we observe from the first scenario to the second scenario improvement in sales, from a significant, very important percentage. We saw improvement in positive reviews and decrease in negative review. The negative review didn't disappear, but they decreased significantly, and we saw much more higher employee morale and higher employee satisfaction. We saw that when you have an employee that is satisfied, is more connected to customer satisfaction. So this means that these things were resolved. It's not fully resolved, but this was only 3 months span, and we support this company and keep on using this system, and also introduce some small meetings in between calls, let's say once a day, at least at midday, where employees can relax and chill out and can talk about not quota, not talk about the budget, not talk about the plans, business plan, marketing strategy. They can talk about themselves, having a coffee with colleagues in the call center, so that they can feel much more at ease, and they can come back to work in the second half of the day more revitalized. So this means, and knowing each other on much more personal level, because employees were so burdened with this demand of closing sales that they felt stressed and they didn't know their colleagues well. With this little meeting in the middle part of the day, every day, Monday to Friday, employees feel more relaxed and they can connect to colleagues in a much more meaningful way, and they came back to work in a less stressed state. And this brought about better relationship within the workplace, much more psychologically safe workplace, because there was no fear, and also higher customer satisfaction. What was a win-win? There was resistance from management. I have to observe, because they were not very convinced. Can this be so simple? I say it's not so simple because it's a big change. Appeared to be simple, but was a very significant change. And I'm very happy that we could help this company.
Good, good. Bruno, we're out of time, but I'm really glad that you came on the podcast. If somebody wanted to hire you, get coached by you, or just say hello, how would they get hold of you?
First off, all these ideas that we spoke today are compiling my new book, The Art of Compassionate Business, published by Routledge in its second edition, more than 400 pages with hundreds of cases on compassionate organization. They can find me on LinkedIn or my website, www.brunocignacco, with double C at the end, .com, www.brunocignacco.com. They can contact me for services or consultancy or training related to this topic. Thank you very much.
Bruno, thank you again for coming on. This was a great time. Thank you.
Michael.
Well, hold on, folks. Don't go anywhere. Let's hear from our sponsors. David Neal, co-founder, Revved Up Kids. Revved Up Kids is on a mission to protect children and teens from sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. They provide prevention training programs for children, teens, and adults. To learn more, go to revvedupkids.org. Henry Kaplan, Century 21. When it comes to making the biggest financial decision of your life, leave it in the hands of a proven professional, Henry Kaplan. Henry is a global real estate agent with Century 21, celebrating his 41st year in business. No matter where you're moving, Henry has the right connections for you. You can contact Henry at 561-427-4888. Well, that's a wrap, folks. A huge thank you to our special guest for sharing such incredible insights today. And of course, a big shout out to you, our amazing listeners, for tuning in and spending your time with us. Remember, networking isn't about being perfect, it's about being present. So take what you've learned today, get out there, and make some meaningful connections. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who could use a little networking inspiration. Let's keep the conversation going. You can find me on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or my website, Michael. Remember, until next time, keep practicing, keep connecting, and keep building those relationships. This is Michael signing off. Take care and happy networking.